when we are truly thriving as a species and as an individual being is when everyone and everything around us is thriving as well.
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Patrick Cooke. Welcome to Being. My guest today is Piers Hampton. As a planetary citizen, Piers explores the lifestyles of many cultures and people, offering us a unique perspective on how we can live and thrive at our best together on this planet. Piers made a decision early in life to forge his own path outside the traditional Western way of life. This decision has brought him into a mindset of service towards all beings, with the understanding that when we are all thriving, all will prosper. His knowledge and passion for creating freedom and prosperity has come from a life living as his own master around the world. Piers Hampton, welcome to Being. If you're enjoying the content, please do subscribe to the show and get a new episode delivered directly to your device every Friday. And as always, I love hearing from you. So please do rate and review the episode on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or whichever platform you prefer. Also, I'm proud to announce that the show is now available on YouTube. And you can also follow us on our new Instagram page at Being with Patrick Cooke. For show notes and more information, head on over to being-podcast.com. Now, on with the show. Piers Hampton, welcome to Being. Thank you for being here, brother.
Thank you so much for having me, Patrick. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, right on. So we met actually in person last year at Envision Festival. For those who don't know, is kind of the Burning Man of the jungle here in Costa Rica. Just a fabulous event, and Piers was there, part of a camp that I was staying in. And got to know you a little bit. I know it was a little chaotic, but I could just, feel your energy and your positivity and your connection. And we've kept in touch ever since. And it's just an honor and pleasure to drop in with you here today, bro.
Yeah, it's so lovely. And I do remember that so smooth. Like, it's such an amazing time that week in the jungle. And as you said, it was chaotic. The amount of people we met, but the amount of beautiful connections that we created at that week that have just kind of unfolded over the years since then has been phenomenal.
Totally, man. I was actually reflecting on that the other day. It's like when I sort of in earnest started down this path of personal transformation, started saying yes to like going to retreats and really putting myself out there and being vulnerable and putting yourself in positions to grow exponentially. The people I've met, and how I've stayed in contact with them, how they've impacted my life over years, and a lot of the guests I've had on the show so far have been people I've met in those containers. And it's just, I was reading on your website about how you can ripple out your effect into the world. And these events and these retreats are a good example of one place to do that.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. It's amazing, actually, like when you start looking at self-development and growth, how important it is about relationships and the other people around you. And I play with manifestation a lot, as a lot of us do, and probably a lot of the listeners do. And so much of manifestation is actually to do with the other and the people closest to you, and even just the people that you've never physically interacted with, the other people on the planet. They're just as important and integral to your manifestation as the self. Wow.
That's awesome. Maybe we can unpack that a little bit. But first, I think, for people who don't know who you are, Piers Hampton, who are you? What is your mission? What is your life purpose? What has your journey been so far to get you to this place?
Beautiful question. So I'm 31 years old now, and it has been a very unique journey for me in my lifetime. I've actually chosen in the past decade to not subscribe to the traditional kind of system of having a job and, security and having those comforts around me to keep me feeling safe. And I've decided to throw myself in a way to the wind, and in a little way as like a lone wolf, kind of putting myself into situations that are not necessarily even the cleverest, and just to see what the outcome is over that time. An example would be in 2015, I went to New York City and I booked a two-way ticket, but I was there for 3 months, and I arrived with $100 in my pocket, and I lived for the 3 months. I managed to create money while I was there, but I basically arrived with that $100 and just let my life happen and let those 3 months unfold, which is such a beautiful story. And, I started sleeping in the park. That was how I managed to stretch out that $100 for the first few weeks. I was in a park in Brooklyn, lucky it was summertime, and put myself in a situation. I was very safe, and I made sure I was, surrounded by, as much safety as I could. But I had so many beautiful angels around me, other people who I met who heard my story and saw my story and decided to just give me a watchful eye or offer me a little bit of work or friendship, company. So doing things like that, definitely, I think it was when I was about 22, 23, I'd been working as a barista, so making coffee in different cities around the world. And that was taking up a lot of my time. I was spending 40, 50 hours a week making coffee for others, and I loved it. I loved, yelling out the coffee orders to people and, giving people their best latte in the morning and, bringing that morning joy. And I realized that actually I didn't want to work for someone else per se, and I had bigger things that I wanted to be doing as well on the planet. I kind of was working for money, and I realized, and what I've realized over the years is, I don't want to work for money. I want to work for my joy and for my highest good and the highest good of everyone and everything. And in turn, I find that the income and the money flows, which has been an experience that I've had. I kind of put myself in the deep end and have had moments where I haven't had much around me. It's like, such as when I went to New York City with $100, and just the outcome has been pure abundance. So definitely kind of untraining myself from, how we get trained at school and how we, especially here in Australia, the definite, and I think it would be the same in America, the definite idea of, going to school and going to uni and getting a blue collar job, or especially here in Australia, to become a tradie, so a tradesman, having a trade. And I just didn't subscribe to that. I decided, my life is different, my path is different. And I find I do also get itchy feet. So if I did sink my feet into something for too long, I'd be like, okay, what's next? I've learned this. Okay, it's not about the money now. It's what's the next facet. And through all of this, I've realized through my path that it's actually, and I think, a lot of people know this and a lot of the great teachers know this, it's actually about service to others and to our world, as opposed to like what it is for ourselves. And we come in turn with that as well. If we are providing service, we then get served by the universe. We get offered all the abundance by the universe. And I do have a big long-term goal. And basically my goal right now is by the year 2028, I would love to see every person on the planet receive a universal basic package. So not just a universal basic income, but actually a package of what is necessary for them to survive on a day-to-day basis. And it's a big goal. It's a big dream. I know not everybody needs it. So there's ways to actually figure it out where it could actually go to the people most in need. But it's things like, and I'm actually a vegan myself, so I don't eat meat for my health reasons and for the animals. And it's things like if we stopped the production of beef alone, we would actually have a pound of grain a day for everybody on the planet. So just by stopping that one industry, we could actually feed everybody on the planet this pound of grain a day. And that could be part of that basic universal package. And that's kind of the manifestation, the direction that I'm pushing myself in towards, which is unfolding. It's off with the universe right now. It's percolating. and I can see it coming about, and it comes just in time. Actually, a lot of some big scientists talk about 2029 being the year of unity. So I figure if we are all to be unified, I think we all need to be fed.
Awesome. Wow, what a lofty and beautiful goal that is. It's incredible to have that kind of vision and to be looking forward. But just coming back to what you're talking about, like how we're conditioned in society to follow the rules and go down a certain path and check the boxes of going to school, getting good grades. For me, it was, a house and wife and kids and a car and all that stuff. And that's supposed to lead us to fulfillment and happiness. But it takes a level of courage and self-trust to break out of that pattern. So I'm really curious, because this is a theme that comes up a lot on the show, is how do we break free of those societal conditioning patterns, those generational ancestral patterns, and really have the courage, summon the courage and the self-trust to leap out of it and out of our comfort zone and go to New York City with $100. Like, what are some practical, advice you could maybe give to listeners? How do you take that step?
Great question. For me, it always leads back to meditation. Actually
Yes,
coming in and doing that self-insight. So when I was 22, I completed my first Vipassana. Vipassana being the meditation technique that the Buddha created to reach enlightenment. And that 10-day period of going internal and actually seeing what are the facets of our existence that is fulfilling, and also observing that suffering, is part of life. That's actually an integral part of life as much as pleasure. And I think being able to sit through 10 days of Vipassana, no talking, observing the mind, observing the self, is probably one of the hardest things that I've ever done. And I go back and I do them again, and every time it reaffirms, like, wow, that's actually really difficult. And you're there in day 2 going, I want to leave.
Yeah, this is hell.
Why am I here? But you realize, okay, I put myself here on purpose to just to observe myself and observe what is real for me. And through that has really helped me to realize that I can step into any situation and go into any sort of anything that's happening around me and be okay. And even if it means that I need to actually go and sit in a 10, 20, 30, 40-minute meditation during that experience, which is what I did in New York. I had 3 or 4 days in, I had a really terrible day. I was sleeping outside. It started raining, and I was like, shit, it's raining, and where am I going to sleep? Yeah. And I was freaking out, and I got a little bit worried, and I was like, okay, go and meditate. And I went and I sat under a bit of cover, and I just went into meditation, and immediately I just felt myself drop out of this ego into my heart, and this all pervading warmth just spread over my body, and just so much joy and happiness filled me up. And I was like, I don't need anything else. Actually, all I need is being here in my body with myself. And that is my utmost fulfillment. And that's my utmost joy in myself. And then I went out and, brought that to the world. And that's a big facet of part of my interplay as well. So I have done a lot of travel over the past decades as we were allowed to travel. Now I'm actually not allowed out of Australia. The country is closed to the world at the moment. But for the past 10 years, I traveled and I lived in places like Europe, in London and Italy and America. And I've lived in Asia, Cambodia, Bali, et cetera, lots of places around the world. And through observing how other countries and other cultures and other people live really opens you up to what alternate potentials there are for operating on this planet. It's not just the Western society's way of, like you said, school, uni, work, wife, babies, job, death. It's not that necessarily. That's one way, and it does work, and it's going to work for countless people, but there are multiple dimensions to it. And So I think society, from my observation, is very self-governing. So when you're in a society, say here in Australia, if you do something that's outside of the norm, people around you kind of pack you back into what's normal because it scares them a bit.
Yeah.
If someone's acting different, like, oh, you're being weird. So they pack you back into that what's normal. And so for me, by stepping outside of the realm of Australia and stepping into other Western countries, Asian countries, quote unquote, third world countries, et cetera, I've experienced that there's so many more ways to live, operate on the planet. And every time that I do that, and every new experience I have reaffirms that I don't just have to stick with that old paradigm. I can create my new paradigm. And it's piecing together all the little bits and pieces that bring me joy, all of the things that I see other people doing, because I learn from everybody else, from my own experience and from observing others. And so if I see someone who, I haven't been a surfer my whole life, but I saw people who were surfing when I was living in Bondi a few years ago. And I really was like, wow, they seem so peaceful and happy, and they come out of the water. It's like, I got to try this. And so I took that little facet from watching them having their experience, and I integrated it into my life, and it's become a major priority in my life.
Me too.
It's another, right?
Yeah.
It's another form of meditation. It's a form of exercise. When you're out there, you have all the negative ions in the water, and just it opens you up and just like allows you to be totally present in the moment, like to be, as the name of this podcast, to be just in a place of beingness.
Yes.
So yeah, that's been a big one for me.
Wow. So many threads I want to follow in that response, but I'll try to narrow it down. I think at the essence of it, though, is what we're talking about is self-actualization and awakening. And it begins with an inward journey. Like, I've always been a seeker my whole life, like a voracious reader. I loved learning. I loved traveling. I went to all the major ancient ruins all over the world, loved it. But I didn't get it that all the answers that I needed were inside of me first, right? And so this happened to me much later in life, that, I recognized that I had to go inwards first to discover who I was at the base essence, and then operate from that place. And I think what you're talking about Vipassana meditation, or any meditation for that matter, allows us to know ourselves absent of external influence. And for a lot of people, that's freaking terrifying, right? Because they're afraid of what they're going to find on the inside, because it's scary, it's painful, it's uncomfortable. And so that's why a lot of people don't do that work. But I think more and more people are waking up to the fact that it's their responsibility to do that work, and it's the path to freedom, right? When you really tune into that wholeness, and you heal what needs to be healed, or you release what needs to be released, or you transmute what needs to be transmuted, you come back to a place of wholeness, and then you can operate and move into the world through that place, as you have done. And then, like you said, you can't be knocked over. Nobody can, take away that wholeness and that happiness, because you've cultivated it inside. And it's a major theme of this podcast and my life. So thank you for sharing your perspective on that. And surfing, again, is another facet where there's connection with nature. Obviously there's exercise, but the meditative state, when you're just sitting there. And I find it's kind of polar, in the sense that you're sitting there waiting for the waves. You're just like, you're moving up and down. And then a big set comes, and all of a sudden you're in like adrenaline mode. And if you don't move, you don't act, you're going to get throttled, right? And then you're on the wave, and then it's pure presence. When you're actually on the wave, there's nothing else. Time is like, it's full flow state. And then you're back to the meditative, and it's such a beautiful practice. Yeah, man. So this is awesome. I'm so thrilled to get a chance to drop in with you and hear more about your story. Again, I want to make it as practical as possible for people. So I was reading your website, and it says, through creating a mindset of abundance, Piers has learned that anything he can imagine is possible. What a powerful statement that is. He learned to trust in his own abilities, to keep moving forward, and to find strength within himself. So what I wanted to ask you is, what is a mindset of abundance, and how do we cultivate it? How do we achieve it?
Beautiful question. So the way that I'm seeing it is that the universe is abundance. There is so much, an infinite supply of matter and energy in our universe, all we have to do is look outside even our planet. Even on our planet, there's more than enough for everybody on our planet to have more than enough, plus to provide more for if we bring more people to this planet as well. But we have been trained, and I don't know the inner mechanics of why we've been trained. I could have some conspiracy theories, but we've been trained into a lack mentality. And it's a generational thing. It's our parents. It's both my parents I've grown up experiencing having a lack mentality that they've had, and they probably got it from their parents as well. And it's this training that, you have to work hard, or you have to go without, or that there isn't enough, and, people are starving. And because of that, like, there isn't enough, and we have to like hoard and keep everything in our little box of stuff, and we can't share and we can't give to others, when in fact there is plenty. I could walk into my backyard right now and feed myself and all the people who are here living at the property I'm with, just with weeds. Weeds that are, and that's an abundance right there. It's a plant that is in the wrong spot, but
Right.
most weeds are edible. Okay, so beautiful. And first example of there being an abundance. If we talk about something like a scarce material like gold, so we say that gold is scarce, but there's an asteroid out there in our solar system that has 3 times the world's GDP of gold sitting on it. It is just a block of gold, right? And that's monetarily abundant, right? But that's sitting out there in our universe. We have a infinite source and flow of energy, whether that be from our earth or from our sun, and from also the aether around us. We can tap into energy sources on many different levels. And breaking free from that lack mentality, which, if I'm really honest, I grew up experiencing that and have spent many, many years dealing with that. And I'm still dealing with that on so many levels. As you break one level down, you realize that underneath it, there's more. And it's the thought below the thought, below the thought, below the thought. And really, it's coming down again to the factor of love and fear, right? Like, what are the two like base thoughts of anything that create anything in life? It's love or fear. Fear contracts and it closes and it brings together, and it just like really like it stops the potential.
Yeah.
When love, like a base thought of love, opens and it releases and it provides and it creates, and it's an infinite energy flow, and you can feel it when you practice this mentality of love. You feel it filling you up. And when you are in that state, abundance being a mindset, so by simply going, you could go into a situation where you just want to look around you and see what things are abundant. And so, okay, like I need to survive. I need water. Fortunately for us, I have a whole glass of water here and a faucet or a tap that I can get essentially an infinite supply of water from. I can water my gardens. That's such a necessary part of our reality, and it's in abundance. Oxygen, the oxygen that is all around us. We need that from our first breath, right? We need oxygen to survive. Obviously, we all breathe, and we haven't yet run out of oxygen. There is an abundance of oxygen. I do hope that we make the right choices as a species with our production of greenhouse gases and things like that to not pollute the supply. But we do have this infinite loop of oxygen out there. So there's an abundance of these necessary elements for us to just thrive and survive as beings on this planet. You can talk about the food. We've talked about food, shelter. Like, we as a species survived for many, many years by creating shelter for ourselves out of plants and out of other tools and implements, or naturally formed shelters such as caves. And now we are in a position where we can start to build these structures around us that provide us security and shelter, and in turn as well sleep. So we're talking about real base levels for just our survival here. The next one that I really look at is community. And I
Yeah.
actually think that it's necessary for our survival that we have community. No, anyone who says, I don't need anybody to survive or thrive or whatever, I think that they've actually got it fundamentally mistaken, where actually, like, from your birth, you've needed other people and you will continue to need other people up until your death. And
100%. I totally agree.
right. And, things like hugs are a nutrient. We actually need a certain amount of hugs a day to thrive and to grow. And there is an abundance of other people on the planet around us. And it's just, creating that connection, that energetic connection to create that feeling of, okay, I'm loved and I'm supported, which then creates that loop, right? That self-fulfilling loop of, okay, I'm supported, I have all of the necessary things to survive around me, and I have like beautiful people around me. I can go out and do anything. I can go out and give the world anything, because I have this mindset of everything that I actually really need is here with me already.
Yes. Beautiful. Wow. Again, so much wisdom packed into that answer. I'd love to ask you about all of it, but a couple of things that came up for me is how powerful we are as creators of our own reality. And it comes down to where we focus our energy and our attention, right? So if you are focused on a lack mentality, a scarcity mentality, a negative mindset, guess what's going to manifest in your world? All of the things that represent that. It's the reflection of the universe is reflecting back what you're putting out. So the more we can orient towards, and it doesn't have to be you can fall into a trap of like toxic positivity, or just turning a blind eye to problems or obstacles, and that's spiritual bypassing. But at its essence, if you can orient towards an abundance mindset and a positive, and recognize how much you are in control and how powerful we are as individuals, everything shifts. Right. And then coming to back to what something you said about, and this might venture into the conspiratorial realm, but scarcity as a mechanism of control. There's powers in the world that are interested in keeping us in a low vibration, in fear, in scarcity, isolated from one another, not in community, not in connection with ourself and our wholeness. And that manifests in the system in so many different ways. Like, we're working 40, 50 hours just to pay the bills. You come home, you're exhausted. You just want to have a glass of wine or a beer and fall asleep, or tune out to Netflix. You don't have the space or energy to sit in stillness and come back to that wholeness. And so you just continue down this unconscious, distracted path, and you basically sleepwalking through life. Right. So that's why I was kind of asking you at the beginning, how do you sort of recognize that you're in that negative feedback loop? And then, what are the steps to break out of it? Because I think at its essence, everybody has to be doing this work now in order for us to really move into the next phase of humanity. Because if we don't, I think there's a sense of urgency here that it's clear that we're going down a very dangerous path, perhaps towards extinction, or at least negating obsoleting our ability to thrive on this planet. So I don't know if there's a question in there, but that was just sort of my reflections to what you were saying.
I did hear a question. It's the idea of like the work, and
Yes.
What is the work
Yes.
that we can do? And it's like, it's actually not a lot. And it goes back to meditation. The work is actually really not hard or a lot, or really, like, you don't have to go out and do a bunch of different things. It's about, focusing that energy, coming and even sitting for half an hour a day by yourself, untrained. If you've never done meditation in your life, just sitting untrained by yourself in a space of just observing your space as it is.
Yeah.
That's the work. And that it's that simple, and I think kind of on the same theme, people are caught in this idea that we have to go out and be busy little bees and do. And, to quote my mom, and also I think this works for the name of your podcast, we are not human doings. We are human beings.
Yes. Love that.
Right?
Love that. Yeah.
We're here to be. And if you look at, and we're here for presence, to be in presence in the now, the eternal now. And something that I believe it was the Buddha said, don't quote me on who said this, but basically the best work we can do, like the most fulfilling and the most productive thing that we can actually do any day is just to sit in meditation with ourselves. That is the most productive thing, which goes completely opposite of how, especially in Western culture, we are trained. Do, work,
Yeah.
assignment. And it's like, even for me now, having all of the learning and experience that I've had, I still go, oh, like, it's that simple. I just have to go and sit for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, an hour, however long it is. And that's the most important action of non-acting I can do in a day. Not doing, being.
Yes, totally. And I think there's a balance there. Definitely being is sort of the Eastern philosophy to know thyself, and it's super, super important. But there is the balance between being and becoming, because there is an impulse, a fundamental evolutionary impulse within us to be more, to constantly be growing, to be evolving, to learn, and I think in a capitalist society that shows up as competition between each other, right? Because we're competing for scarce resources, right? But at its essence, it's an impulse that we want to be better in the world. So there is a balance between being and becoming, but most people are not focusing on and cultivating the being aspect of themselves first. They're just going straight to the doing. So I have to be in competition. I have to make money. And you get caught in the survival mode of fight and flight. You get caught in your ego, right? And that's the paralysis that the world is in, is we're caught in this ego trap. But like we said earlier, if you come back to that stillness, that sense of being first, and then you operate from that place and take action from there, then you'll be far more effective, far more fulfilled, probably make more money. All of these things that we're chasing by the doing aspect can be brought to us with ease and joy and fulfillment if we tap into who we are first. Right. And that's where Western society has it completely backwards. It's like, okay, do, make all the money, then retire, then you can be. And it's like, what? That's absolutely ridiculous. And again, at the risk of sounding conspiratorial, I think it's in the best interest of the powers that be to keep us that way, because we're more easily controlled when we're busy, when we're distracted, when we're fearful, when we're sick, when we're scared. Right. And so coming back to that place of being in wholeness, sitting still, is an act of revolution. It's a rebellion, and it's taking your power back. And that's probably my primary goal with this podcast, is to remind people how powerful they are and encourage them to come back to that place of being, and then move from there and be effective in the world and be more fulfilled and make more money. Like, who doesn't want to do that?
For sure. And it's funny how you actually said it's in their best interests for, like, we could use the word elites.
Yes.
That's just a word. Don't attach that to this. But it's, as you said, it's in their best interests. But really, because as you said, there's a scarcity mindset, right? And they want this greed. Greed is an ego-based thing, right? So they want more for themselves because of, I guess, a lack of security in themselves, thinking that they won't survive if they don't have more.
It's fundamental insecurity and fear, right?
Right.
And woundedness.
And there are studies that have been done that they look at, okay, is that better off for them? And if some people are not having enough, if they're having enough, is that better off for them? Or if everybody, including everyone, the kids in Africa, the people in Asia, the people in Europe, the Americans, South Americans, the Australians, if everybody had enough to be thriving, and it is fairly basic. We spoke about it at the start of the podcast. If everybody had enough, there's those elites, there's that word again, they actually would be better off. They'd be actually in a better situation when everybody has enough just to survive each day, just to be able to succeed through the day and thrive throughout that day. And that is it's a fundamental mindset change from, as we said, that fear into that place of love, and realizing that it's when we are truly thriving as a species and as an individual being, is when everyone and everything around us is thriving as well. And of course, in life there are deaths and there is, calamity. That is part of life. But in the meantime, prior to that future transformation, that experience where everybody's thriving is what's going to bring us our highest enlightenment. And that's why for me, I'm like, okay, like I've stepped outside of the realm of I have to work and do and create abundance for myself monetarily and for houses, etc. Where it's like, okay, let's get everybody on the planet looked after. It's a big goal, but only at that point can I turn around and go, okay, now we can really do the work.
Yes. Well, what just came up for me is that how do you not create a sort of welfare state? You know, if you're taking care of everybody, it has to be one of my mentors and somebody I listen to a lot, Daniel Schmachtenberger, calls a cultural enlightenment, where we're providing education and self-development and what we're creating are citizens that can contribute positively to a healthy democracy, to a healthy collective, to a healthy conversation on what ought to be, not just what is. Right. And so it's not just about feeding and taking care of them. It's like, let's develop human beings at scale. And so we can have a collective consciousness, a collective intelligence that is operating in everybody's best interests. And one of the metaphors he uses is a cell in the body. And, you know, you have a cell, say, within the liver, you know, and it's autonomous. It has its own sovereignty. It's operating in its best interest to survive, but it's also contributing to what's best for the liver and the body by extension, right? So it's not just going off and doing whatever the hell it wants at the expense of everybody else. It's doing what's best for it and the whole at the same time, right? And so right now we have a bunch of humans just bumping into each other, you know, competing and trying to get profit and, you know, taking advantage of each other. What we need is that entire thing operating as a whole, as an organism. And because we're so new to this idea of abstract thinking and consciousness just coming online, and, you know, yesterday in evolutionary terms, you know, this is a new thing and we're fucking it up, frankly. And hopefully we don't fuck it up. Yeah, we don't fuck it up so bad that we obsolete our, you know, ability to continue on the planet. That's why there's a sense of urgency. But I think at the root of everything we're talking about, yes, you have to have your fundamental needs of survival taken care of: food, water, shelter. But then beyond that, community, education, you know, cultivating more powerful, grounded, whole, healed humans at scale, right? And again, the system or the powers that be, that's not in their best interest. And so, you know, it's a massive hurdle. But I think at the individual level is where we begin, and that's why, you know, taking responsibility for your own, how you show up in the world, and then rippling that outward in community is the best way to change the world.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I've found as being one of the best ways to educate others. You know, if you see someone doing something that you don't think is for their best interests, you can go and tell them. But if they really don't want to hear it, or if they haven't asked, they probably won't listen. If you lead by example, leading by example is a great way to teach, because people observe and they see the outcome. They're like, wow, that really worked for that person. I might take that on board.
Yeah.
Something I heard yesterday that kind of plays into what you're talking about is this idea that as a species, we don't have a collective myth, something that we as a collective are all like working towards. We're kind of not sure why we're here on the planet, and we don't, as a collective, I'm talking, we don't have like a general, like, why are we here? What's our reason? What are we working towards? What are we meditating towards? What are we being towards? And that is something that's fundamentally right now. It's one of the first times in that we are aware of in our history where we don't have that collective myth that we are heading towards. And that's something that religion has solved in the past, and different aspects of we've had that. And I think, you know, now coming into the Western culture, we're seeing more and more people having this awakening and this realizing that it's not just about the self. It is, we are an organism. This whole planet is a living organism. And, you know, for me, like, cultivating this idea of a myth in my mindset of, okay, like, it's not just me, it's, we're here to make the world better for everyone and everything, and the universe better for everyone and everything, and the future generations, to forward evolution, to enhance and to succeed through life, just to leave the world better than it was when we got here. And it's, this is a new concept that I've actually come across recently, and like coming down to the hard nails of what the myth is still in a way eluding me. And that's great, because it gives me something else to be working towards, always having that next thing to learn, or that next little kind of pull allows you to go, okay, there is some more to work towards. And it's interesting, you look at, some diseases and that happen to people on the planet. It seems that disease occurs when you don't have something that you are trying to lead yourself towards. Like if you are just in a state of passiveness and not like feeling that you actually have anywhere that you're going, that's when your body can start to shut down and say, well, what's the necessity of me being here? I'm not an integral organism anymore. And the body will actually shut itself down and maybe create cancers and other diseases like that. And there was this story I heard of this quite famous author. He before he was an author, he was diagnosed with a terminal illness. And he was like, okay, well, before I go, I have to create some money for my wife and my future generations that are still here on the planet. So he went about and he wrote 10 books in a really short period of time, 6 months to a year. And by the time he finished his 10th book, because he'd found purpose and reason, his terminal illness was gone. He healed himself just with purpose. And that gives me shivers to think about that. It's like, wow, go and sit and figure out your purpose every day. That will change. Purpose changes. You're going to achieve your purpose at one time in your life and go, okay, what's the next step? What is my next purpose? And it can change and shift every day. And, that's really that like centeredness on, awareness of the self and where you are, and what the base like volition is for your actions. Going back into, how we like to be busy little bees and do. Are you like, why? What's your reason for going out and doing these doings? Like, do you like look deep? And is that coming from a place of lack? I have to work, I have to go do these things because I don't have enough and I have to make more for my family, lack. Or is it coming from I actually want to go out and, make more forests and create more abundance and create more connection and actually have that volition of, I want to spread more love in the world. And that then leads into that purpose, which then, when it comes to manifestation, that base volition is what's going to manifest externally from the actions, right?
Yes.
So it is a whole technique. This conversation isn't purely about manifestation. We don't need to go through the ups and downs of manifestation today, but really like that base thought is so important. Love or fear. Love or fear. And you can always question yourself, this action that I'm taking right now in my life, what is the base thought for this? And then, if you find it is fear, you can be really just like calm with yourself and go, okay, I acknowledge that I'm acting from fear, and I'm going to be calm and forgive myself and have compassion to myself. But what action can I take that sponsors the thought or the base volition of love? And see then in your life what outcomes can come from that.
Beautifully articulated. And I totally agree. We have a choice in every moment, every action, every thought, every reaction, and questioning ourselves and being aware if it's coming from love or fear. That is a great barometer to check in with yourself. But it does take a level of self-awareness, and that only comes through stillness and reflection, and meditation, again, is a fabulous tool. So I highly recommend it. But I love what you said about a myth, that we don't have a unifying myth. And that reminded me of another school of thought about game A and game B. And if you're not familiar, I'll just sort of run through it quickly. A group of sort of visionary thinkers in around 2013 came out. Jordan Hall was, I think, the guy who coined the term. But game B being described as the status quo, what we've been doing for the last 10,000 years, why civilizations have risen and fall, and every civilization has eventually crumbled, and sort of analyzing, okay, what are the characteristics of civilization so far? Why have they all crumbled? And we're watching the United States right now, which is basically in the death throes of what a democracy looks like, an empire looks like when it's crumbling. And they identified the sort of characteristics of being fragility, rivalrous games, and centralization. And so we're looking towards what game B is what they call it would be, where we have a civilization that's thriving, society that's thriving, like the whole, like the liver I was talking about earlier, where everybody's contributing in their best interest and what's best for the whole. And what does that look like? So anti-fragile, which means more pressure that's put on it, it gets stronger, rather than when more pressure gets put on it, it collapses, like we're looking at the financial system, which might be a nice segue into what I want to talk about next. Anti-rivalrous, where I was talking about in capitalism, where we're just in competition for each other and fundamentally incentivized to disinform and spread lies into the information ecology for strategic advantage. And then centralization, where it's one power, basically top down, and broadcasting all the news from a centralized place. And so game B, or what a myth could be, is, this idea, and nobody really knows what it looks like, but that's the formation of this myth we can do together over time. And it looks like something that's decentralized. And what that looks like at the base level is each individual, like I was talking earlier, doing the individual work of personal development. Then they contribute to the next layer of community and family first, and then small community building outwards, of everybody is healed and whole and in tune and educated, and their basic needs are taken care of, so we can contribute to a greater society. And then that society becomes a nodal point of nodal points all over the world that becomes a decentralized network of collective intelligence and choice making, which then is a bottom up system rather than a top down system, right? And that's kind of what I tap into, or what came up for me when you mentioned a myth, like a mythic sort of goal. That's what it is for me. And so my question to myself is, how do I behave? How do I show up every day in order to be a better citizen, contributor to that collective consciousness? And one of the other place that we intersected, which was a cryptocurrency mastermind, where you shared a lot of your knowledge and wisdom with me and the others in the group. And it's put me on a whole other level now, looking at what blockchain does, looking at what Bitcoin, looking at what cryptocurrency does, and how that can be part of a valuable tool in this decentralized game B myth, right? So maybe this is a good time to sort of dive into that for people, because I definitely am a total noob, a total rookie to the world. But for people who don't know, can you maybe explain what is blockchain, what is cryptocurrency, and what is Bitcoin? Just sort of gloss over the details.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that for you. It's interesting because a lot of people have probably heard the word Bitcoin. Not as many people have probably heard the word blockchain. And I think right now there's kind of an understanding around this technology, and that's what blockchain is. It's a new technology. You can observe it as a virtual machine. So a machine that doesn't have nuts and bolts. It actually it acts and operates on the internet and throughout, like in a decentralized fashion, throughout a bunch of different nodal points around the world. And it's not just based around currency and finance. It's not just a monetary thing. Money is just one of its use cases. So Bitcoin being the first blockchain developed in 2009 as a distributed ledger. So say you own a business, and every time you make a sale, you write that sale down, how much you took in, and then that's a ledger that's happening. With this distributed ledger that blockchain and Bitcoin is built upon, it basically creates many different copies of the same ledger that are stored on many different computers around the world, and they all have to reach a point of consensus for any transaction to go through and be accepted by the system. So you can't fraudulate the system, and you have complete records and unadulterated records of any transactions that have happened in the past. And that's what builds, without getting too technical, that's what builds these chains of blocks that we've called the technology blockchain. And there's an infinite, if I can say, an infinite amount of use cases for this technology. And I'm still very much learning. I have a decent amount of knowledge, but it's almost like, a good way to kind of think about it is we saw the internet kind of come about 1995 to the year 2000 was really the birth of the internet getting out to the masses. And it was still very early days. People thought that at that point it was just an email. They're like, oh, I can send an email back and forth. It's okay, great. But it's evolved to now, like, I'm talking to you through the internet, and we're sharing this to hundreds, thousands, millions of people who can at any time in their life decide to turn this on and watch this now. And there's so many facets to the internet, and it's become our whole reality. We do our work on the internet, we do our communication, our conversation, our ordering. Everything is on this platform that they've built. And you can kind of see the virtual machine that is blockchain as being this new layer of the internet, this new next evolution of that, but still being in such early days that the actual outcomes and the way it's going to fundamentally change our operation status quo on the planet is yet to come. And we can discuss, the different potentials there are. One of them being governance.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very, very interesting, because living in a democratic society here in Australia, I have voted. And I remember, since being 18 years old, going whenever it's necessary, going and writing my ballot and putting that in the thing and go, okay, I voted. But I didn't really feel like, what's it doing? Where's it going? I don't really know. It didn't feel like I'm actually having a say. It's just, I'm actually in Australia, if you don't vote, you have to pay a fine. So I'm almost in a way forced to go and vote, right? And then the other day, this new, this separate blockchain from Bitcoin, it's called Cardano. They've integrated their governance system, and I actually cast my first vote into that governance system, and they're going to be doing voting throughout their system throughout the years, where we as operators on that platform, on that blockchain, get to actually choose the direction where that decentralized virtual machine is going. And for the first time in my life, I experienced actual voting power. I was like, wow, my say matters. And it's not going to be adulterated. They're not going to be able to go and mute me and my choice. That is forever, as long as that blockchain exists. And it's going to be very hard to pull down these blockchains once they're operational and have a network effect behind them. That vote and that democratic system it's infallible, which was mind-blowing for me. That's just one. I wouldn't doubt that we're going to have governmental systems running on the back end of blockchains in the future. And so that everything that governments that we see as centralized will actually be running on decentralized systems. So we've talked about finance, governance, supply chain tracking, being able to see, I'm wearing this shirt here. Who made this shirt? Who grew the cotton that this shirt is made from? I don't know these questions. Who owned this shirt before? How much did they pay for it? Which country did it come from? With blockchain technology and supply chain tracking, you'll be able to actually measure from the farmer who planted the seed all the way through the whole processes, the shipping, the costs, everything, who sew it together. To me, then I've actually got this at an op shop. I buy things from op shops now. With a thrift shop in America.
Thrift stores in America, yeah.
Thrift store, yeah. And in the future, you'll be able to just simply use a QR code, or maybe the technology will evolve again, to be able to see where, when, who, how, why all these things came into being. And it allows us a level of sovereignty of our choices. I believe where we put our value is also making a vote into the system. Like if
Totally.
I choose to purchase organic food, I'm voting, I want more organic food. And in this case, like when in the future, when the supply chain systems are fully integrated, you'll be able to walk into a supermarket or a clothing retail shop, scan the item that you're looking at, and look, was there slave labor behind it? Was someone underpaid to create this, et cetera, et cetera? And so that's another facet where it's going to fundamentally shift how we operate on the planet. Also looking at self-identity. The identity of ourselves at the moment. There's so many websites that we've signed up, put our emails in for, social medias, WordPresses and Canvas and all these different websites where you're giving your identity out and trying to prove it's you, but there's identity fraud and identity theft. And it's pretty easy actually to like kind of do this like SIM swap attack, where if you've got a phone and it's attached to an email, someone can basically get a new SIM card, ring up your phone company, pretend that they're you, convince the phone company that they are you, and then steal your data, once they've got your SIM. And that's so easy. It happens every day.
Yeah.
And with identity on the blockchain, once you've established, I'm not sure necessarily which blockchains will do this the best, but once we've built our identity into the blockchain, it will be locked by you. You will have the private access to that identity documents and certification. But if you ever need to prove that you are you for a driving test, a license, for a flight, anything, whatever it is, to purchase a product online, you can just use your private little key, not a physical key, a digital key, and you'll actually be able to prove to the system, not to a person, but to a decentralized system. Yes, this is me. I have all the access codes for my identity. And you can then plug yourself into whatever system or technology or software that you then need access to. And these are just, we've mentioned, a few little potential aspects from blockchain that we have. We're starting to see NFTs, so non-fungible tokens, which are, I could own like a very rare Pokemon card, for example, and I could be holding that Pokemon card and okay, this is a physical thing. But I think what's going to occur is in the future, if you just have the physical thing and don't have the digital blockchain-based version of that, how can you prove that you actually own this? You may have it, but where did you get it from? What did you pay for it? In the future, everything, property, shares for stocks, for like companies, any sort of collectible, even vintage clothing will all be also separated, will have this non-fungible token attached to it to prove ownership and to prove like it's where it came from in the past, et cetera, et cetera. And it's this, basically what we're seeing is the digitization of everything that we are as a species. And we are moving, that could be a bit scary to some people. But if we look at what's happening with humans and with the internet, the advent of technology as we know it today, we are moving towards this digital medium. And in some ways it can create, in our past, I think we've all experienced spending way too much time on social media, right? It can create some issues, but we're still kind of kids in the playground, picking up sand and eating sand because we don't know that we should just feel it between our toes. So we're learning how to operate with this new tech. And when we, give it a few years, when we start to really integrate into ourselves and really see it as an opportunity to create more ease in our life and to create more abundance in our life and to stop waste on big governmental global planetary systems, we'll actually be able to see it really bring back to us as individuals and as a collective this abundance. I think it ties directly into the abundance mindset. It's just going to basically put it up there on this virtual machine for us. And at that point, it kind of hits you in the face. You can't turn around and be like, no, there's lack, because it's right there in front of you.
Wow. Amazing. So many real world applications that you went through for blockchain technology. And one of the things that came up for me is transparency. There's a lot of obviously nefarious intent and corruption within the system currently. And so if you can see, for example, where the product came from and track its lineage, then it eliminates a lot of the middlemen, and it creates transparency where there's no debate about where this came from and how it was made. Another application I've heard, I'm a musician and a songwriter, is like eliminating the record companies and the 80% they take off the top for songwriters. When we create a new song or a new artistic creation, you're immediately attributed the percentage that you contributed to that on the blockchain, and it's there forever. And then it's digitally tracked whenever that's played or whenever it's performed or on Spotify, and you get paid directly as the artist. So it's eliminating the middleman and the bloat within the system that creates. Having said that, I want to, because you always have to look at both sides. It's like there's obviously so many benefits to blockchain. What are the sort of nefarious, malevolent applications that could be coming from the blockchain? One that jumps to mind for me is, because there's so much transparency and everything is recorded on the ledger, it's a loss of privacy. And that can be manipulated to create sort of a surveillance state where everything you do is monitored and recorded. And if you, step out of line, there could be repercussions. So what are some of the things that you've come across that could be nefarious uses for blockchain?
I think it definitely comes back to that. Is it decentralized or is it centralized?
Yeah, right.
So this technology can, I would say something like, I'm not saying they're nefarious, but Amazon have created their own blockchain,
right,
their AWS service, but they're a centralized company that they don't have other nodes. They can fully choose, they can mute it, they can change it, they can adulterate it because it is centralized.
Which is why they can take down Parler, for example, immediately, because they were on their blockchain, on their servers.
Exactly. So if we are choosing decentralized systems or blockchains that are created by, you have to do your research into these companies. Bitcoin, the creators are anonymous and we don't know who they are, but all of these other second generation blockchains, Ethereum, Cardano, etc., they do have some sort of centralized party that has begun it. Are they moving towards a decentralized system? So, for example, Cardano is eventually, and it's sooner than later, they are going to be essentially releasing the virtual machine to the wild, to us as the people who are operating on the system, and the people who choose the governance and the direction it's going. And once it reaches, once they've built their little baby, they kind of give it to the world, and they only will have as much say in the future as we do at that point. And so then at that point, it is becoming the network that is the one operating it, as opposed to one centralized party. So that would be a way that someone nefarious could be coming in, as if they're building a blockchain that is actually centralized,
right,
and under one system where they can control where it's going and how it's operating. And if something that happens they don't like, they can change it. That's not truly how blockchain is meant to operate. I think as well, people will be creating technologies that are what they call blockchains, but they're actually not the same technology, in a way to scam people, defraud people, probably around monetary systems. You have to be very aware of that right now, where the industry is going through so much hype that you could come along and create this new wonder coin that's going to change everything and make everybody a billionaire, and then just do what's called a rug pull. And once everyone's placed their money into it, take away everything and delete the website, and they've just essentially taken all the money at that point. So that's nefarious actors utilizing the technology. You were talking about privacy. That's a really big one. And, the privacy of our data. I think I would say that probably what's going to happen is we're going to see the technology come out in the blockchain space where each one of us will have our own unique personal chain that we can operate on ourselves, that is only accessible by ourselves. There's this like identity one I was talking about before, because you don't want everybody to have access to your identity, right? Unless you choose to give it out. So we already have seen blockchains that have been created where you can send money anonymously, and it actually, you don't have the ledger visible to anybody in the world. It is private, and I think we can utilize that. Maybe with money, that's not so necessary, because why do you need to hide where you're spending your money? Like money should actually really be open source. But when it comes to like identity and self data, or data, depending which country you're in, to have your own private accessible chain that securely stores it forever. And maybe it can be like decentralized and stored on other computers and other nodes, but they don't have access to it unless they have the private key that I mentioned, to actually get access to that information, right? So it'd be like kind of how cloud technology, all of our data is up in the cloud, but only we have the key to be able to access it. That would be, I would say, the direction we'll go. And we'll have to go through many tests of how hackable is these systems, and how infallible and the technology is unfolding, to see how that's going to fully function and fully work. We can have the open source. Everybody can see every transaction on Bitcoin, plus also the closed loop. Only when you give access can you see this. And, as I said with identity before, say you want to sign up for a new social media that you need to prove your identity for, you won't need to give your identity to a person and say, prove to that person that you are real, which is this way now. So you're giving your info to a centralized source. You just have to have literally the proof is that you have the keys to unlock your identity information. And that plugs it into the social media system that you're wanting to integrate with. And it's actually the virtual machine. It's saying, okay, you have the proof of legitimacy here. One quick look, access done, cool. And then it will close it off, and it will no longer have access to that identity. You've just proven that's who you are. And as well, like you spoke about music, and I think that's a huge application for blockchain. And like you may as a musician write a whole album, and every song you release onto the blockchain, and your album is actually built onto a blockchain, but you may not want to release that album for another year, because you might have an actual like world tour, release date, et cetera, et cetera. You have one single that's out. So you can choose to, okay, I'm going to have all these on the blockchain and stored there, so they're secure, like a hard drive or the cloud. It's secure and it's stored, and it's being stored on multiple nodes around the world, but only I have the access to it. And then you can come in later and say, okay, it's time to release it, and choose the parameters and say, okay, release this album, right? And so at that point, that's when you're saying, okay, now it's becoming open to the world. But not anyone can come along then and just rip it off. Like on YouTube or, all of these music operating websites, you can just download the song in different ways. With blockchain, you could say, okay, I want to pay per view. So every time someone listens, you might just accept a microtransaction, 5, 10 cents, whatever it is, 1 cent. It might be a pay per minute or pay per second. You might choose, okay, you can rent this song and you get royalties for when it's played out. Or you could just have it open source and be like, okay, this whole album, one song is for everybody. It's for free. You can use it in videos, blah, blah, blah. That's for the world. This song is able to be rented and you pay me to use it in your videos and stuff like that as a royalty. This song is a pay per second. You can affect and change all the parameters for each individual piece of data that you integrate into the system. And if you choose in the future, you're like, okay, this song is actually a limited release. It's only going to be available to anybody who buys it and maybe gets access off it. Maybe there's only 100 of them, and then I can lock it. And it's once you've bought it, you own it. But then after that, it's locked and no one else can actually have access to that as well. So you can turn it private again. So there is always, with the advent of technology, room for nefarious activity.
Yeah.
I'm sure from the early days of mining gold to the internet to everything that's occurred, people unfortunately are greedy and are going to be heading down that path. But it'd be very interesting to watch how, as blockchain does fundamentally shift how we operate, people might realize that it actually is better to be a player in the system as opposed to trying to abuse the system.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't doubt, I'm just kind of playing with my thoughts here, but I wouldn't doubt that at some point the people who as scammers will turn around and go, it's actually going to be better off for me to actually just join this and not scam.
Yeah.
Which will be very interesting at that
That would
point.
be nice, right? Awesome. Well, that was beautifully articulated and explained the blockchain technology, because it is complex and it is difficult to understand. So thanks for sharing your knowledge around that. We have talked about, and I don't want to keep you too long, dude. We could just talk all day, but just have a couple more questions for you. This is so awesome. Thank you, Piers. But we've talked about gold. You've brought up a couple of times, and I mentioned about the financial system based on the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency that is currently faltering. When they decoupled from gold as the gold standard, backed by gold, the dollar is now they're just printing money, going out of style, and that is obviously unsustainable. So I wanted to ask you about, and for the listeners, if maybe you've been living under a rock, but Bitcoin has been in the news a lot lately, about as being a hedge, a store of value against the devaluation of the dollar. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are, Piers, about is Bitcoin moving towards the next global currency? Is that a possibility? And what's to stop, again, from these nation states or elites from instituting like their own centralized currency that sort of disempowers the blockchain and puts power back in the control of central bankers?
Great question. I definitely think Bitcoin's here to stay. It has a great chance of becoming a new global reserve. As we have seen in history, every 100 years or so, we change the global reserve. We are living in a planetary system now. It's no longer just separate countries. So it's time to have a single unifying planetary system. I will say that Bitcoin won't be the only one, the only blockchain with financial value on it, and may not be the actual currency of choice. That may, as Bitcoin is being termed as digital gold. So we don't actually use gold now to transact mostly. We are using a more tangible, like more of a current flow of value. And I think that I would say that there are other blockchains that are being developed that will solve the general day-to-day transactions. And Bitcoin will then be acting more as a store of value. That will be my kind of view on it. And it seems though, like having watched the markets now for a few years, the crypto markets, Bitcoin acts as the reserve for all these other coins. When Bitcoin moves, the other coins move as well. And I would say it is definitely a risk for any person with a spare few $100s. I've been saying this for a year now. Anyone, if you have a spare few $100s, to not put it into Bitcoin, to have it, it's a risk, and I was saying this when Bitcoin was $5,000. If you had a couple $100s, I said this to some friends, if you had a couple $100, put it in Bitcoin, forget about the money, kiss it goodbye, and just watch what happens. And, now that's worth $1,000, right? I think it's a risk not to own a little bit of it. Eventually you will probably own it anyway, so you may as well get in now. And even if that means when it comes to, there is that decentralized currency that becomes the main accepted form of currency on the planet, you've already got the base goal to be able to buy into that currency and get more value for it than just using your fiat money that you have. How could a centralized government rein power back? if a centralized government came up with a system or a blockchain that was similar, and we as a people, the planetary people, decided to choose a centralized system and actually utilize that network, that would be how they would gain power and gain control. So it's up to our choice. Where we spend our dollars and what we do with our value is our individual sovereign choice. And if I choose to stay utilizing blockchain that is decentralized, like Bitcoin and Cardano, I'm choosing that that's where I want to transact. If I don't put any of my value into this new imaginary that we're talking about, created governmental blockchain, they don't have any power because they don't have any network effect.
But is there a way to forcibly implement that, though? Like, could the government come up with a centralized banking currency and, say, outlaw a Bitcoin, or make the taxation on cryptocurrency so prohibitive that it just becomes you're forced to move into the centralized currency?
Yeah, I'm sure at some points they will.
They're going to try it. Yeah,
they're going to try it, and that, like, as far as I see it, it's nothing to do with the governments. Right. They haven't created this. And I don't remember signing any documents when I was a baby saying that I actually have to play with their system. I've played in their system and I pay tax when I play in their system. But when I'm utilizing this technology that's nothing to do with them, why would I be, choosing to play with them when I don't actually believe in what they're doing? And I'm not saying don't pay taxes. If you are buying cryptocurrencies for, trading it, trying to make money, pay taxes, otherwise you get in trouble. But if you're actually utilizing it to exit those systems, then you're like, by choice, you're actually choosing not to play in their systems or by their rules. Will they become a totalitarianism?
Totalitarianism? That's a tough word.
That's the one. Will they become one of those governments where they enforce rules upon us? At that point, we're going to have to stand up as a people. Like that's when maybe revolution comes about. And I hope it doesn't go that route. Like in America, like very, very close to a civil war. And I was in America last year and I experienced that, and it was shocking. The unfolding is going to be very interesting. And again, my hope would be that the governments realize that actually this system is better for them as well. It's better to offer freedoms to the people and integrate these new technologies into their legacy systems and transmute over into this new style of functioning and play with it. I think that they'll actually find that people will work with them more. And if that means, integrating taxes and stuff into that from sales and purchases in the future, great. Like that's a fantastic thing. We'll actually be able to start to see where our tax goes. Right now we pay tax and it just disappears. They say they built a road, but we'll actually be able to say, okay, I pay my tax and I can track where that money went. If it went to one individual person, or if it went to build a new school. So it's in their best interests to play with it. And we're starting to see that. We're seeing many, many, many central banks around the world start to look at central bank digital currencies. I know America has now made it legal for all of their banks to basically hold Bitcoin and stable coins. So I think that's definitely the right direction to go. It's too far gone. If they were going to shut it down, they would have had to do it 10, 20 years ago, but like 8-9 years ago, when Bitcoin was still a baby. It's now very well spread around the world. There's now many, many people who operate entirely off cryptocurrencies and don't even touch the legacy financial system. And it would have to take firepower. It would have to take actual, unfortunately, war if they were going to try and implement these new systems upon us. Unless we're that asleep as a people. I really hope we're not that asleep.
I hope so too, brother. I hope so too.
Yeah.
Well,
I hope that answers your question.
yeah, it totally does. And like you said about transparency, knowing where your tax dollar goes, like that can end corruption and crony capitalism like overnight if we can actually see where our tax dollars are going. So that is a beautiful application. Dude, we could talk all day. This has just been so awesome. I'm so grateful for you coming on the show and it's sharing your knowledge and your passion. So much wisdom shared today. I just have one more question for you. I love asking this to my guests. If you were to take all of your experiences, all of your knowledge, all the wisdom gained, and distill it down to one message or one sentence, what would it be?
Be the one.
Beautiful. Mic drop. Piers Hampton, ladies and gentlemen. So awesome, dude. So awesome to connect with you. Do you want to let people know where they can find you online?
Yeah, you can find me on my Instagram at Piers Hampton. And you can also I do have some YouTube stuff up there as well. So search my name on YouTube, Piers Hampton, and also my website as well, www.piershampton.com. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me, ask me any questions, and yeah, keep the conversation rolling. I loved doing this with you, Patrick. It was so wonderful. Like,
so
as you
good.
said, we keep chatting all day, and I'm sure we will do this again.
Absolutely. I'd love to have you back on the show. Piers Hampton, I'll put all those links in the show notes so people can reach you. And dude, again, so much gratitude for you. And thank you for all the work you're doing in the world. Much love, brother.
Thank you. So much love to you.
All right, bro. Cheers. Hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And if you enjoyed the show, please do subscribe, rate, and review. For more information and show notes, head on over to being-podcast.com. We'll see you next time. And remember, live your being.